Well, I think the point that I was making today, and that the way I approach it when I do research as well, is that it can mean a lot of things. Can mean the whole notion of strategy, especially in the public sector context, is extremely broad and often not quite ambiguous and nebulous. And the notion of strategy is being used in order to describe a whole range of different phenomena that used to be called different things, such as in the public sector context, say regulation, policy making, planning, so forth, but where the notion of strategic management has grown in prominence both in practice and in research. Well, I think the textbook approach, if you like, is a relatively linear approach where you start with a relatively broadly based analysis of what the strategic position of an organization is, what the strategic environment looks like, the regulatory environment, the institutional political environment, etc. And then work out a strategy from there, which is then forms the basis for goal setting and performance measurement, and hopefully organizational performance improvement. That's the traditional, what we sometimes call the textbook approach. And then they have the alternative approach, which sort of starts from the premise that strategy making, strategy formation is not something that starts from scratch every time, but rather is very much embedded in the existing information systems and draws on the existing performance information that's available to an organization. And from there, so that is a more narrow way of defining strategy, if you like. And from there you take it through the steps of setting targets, and measuring performance and changing behavior. Well, if you take a very rational approach to it, and which I'm not sure that organizations always do, but if you take a very rational managerialist approach to it, it partly depends on what you want to achieve with strategy, what the strategy process, if you like, the whole discourse around strategy, or the whole process of shaping strategy, what you want to achieve with that, whether it's a matter of shaking an organization up, rejuvenating an organization, and really take a thorough look at what the organization is all about and what you should be doing and what you should be achieving, then you may want to go for a more broadly based, say, the traditional textbook based approach. However, the drawback of that is that it can be quite time consuming and costly, and it can create a lot of political conflicts, and hence if that is something that you want to avoid as a manager, you go for the more alternative approach, a narrower approach to formulating strategy. But the problem with that approach is that it closes down the discussion about what strategy is or what it should be, perhaps sometimes prematurely. And as a result, you are missing, there is a risk that you may be missing important things, and in the worst case scenario, end up marginalizing stakeholders who you should really be serving as an organization. It's hard to tell. I think you can see elements of both, and they sometimes overlap, and they sometimes occur at different points in time in the same organization.
Okay.
So I think that's very difficult. I don't have any evidence yet to suggest that one approach is better than the other. I think there is a tendency in some research on this in the public sector, public management literature, to take the textbook approach for granted and see that as an ideal and not questioning it. And what I want to do is to get people to think about strategy, so that, as I said in the lecture, a strategic decision is something that you haven't thought about, or a substitute for thinking, perhaps.
Thank you very much for today.
Okay.